Hi everyone, my name is Brenda and I'm here today to show you how I hand dye my cross stitch fabric. So I recently posted a picture on Priscilla and Chelsea's Facebook page, Stitching with the Housewives, and got lots and lots of feedback and lots of questions about what is the process that I use and how do I do that. So I'd like to show you the very first piece that I hand dyed and kind of what started it all. And it's a Mary Poppins design. So I wanted kind of a London fog look for the fabric. So I messed around and came up with this for my very first hand dyed fabric. And I was so excited with how it turned out. It was exactly what I was looking for. So I've experimented a little bit more and done some more dyeing. So I'm going to share with you some examples and then we'll get into the process. And FYI, my Stitching with the Housewives t-shirt came in the mail just this morning. So excited to have that. So fun. So this is a piece that I hand dyed just recently, and this is on 28 count Monaco, which is what we'll be dyeing on to today. And I used, this is aquamarine Rit dye with some tan added in just to kind of mute it down, but it just turned out fabulous. And then I stitched my chocolate bunnies design on there. So just love that one. I haven't finished it yet fully, but that'll be coming. And then I wanted to share with you, I'm really returning to cross stitching. I used to stitch many years ago until I had 4 little kids running around the house, and now I'm getting back into it because my kids are older. And I've really enjoyed it as a hobby. And this is the one that really kind of got me back into it. So this came from Fat Quarter Shop. It's a Lori Holt design, and it is a vintage Christmas sampler. So I want to share with you that quick, because this is really what got me back into stitching. I still have to add a few of the buttons, but that is my finished stitching. And I used the 10 count Lori Holt Ada in the oatmeal color. So just love that one. I have to finish the buttons and then get it in a frame. Super excited. All right, so I wanted to share some examples of some recent dyeing that I've done, and then we will jump into the process here. This one turned out very dramatic. And I'll talk a little bit about this later when I share some side-by-side examples, but I did less scrunching on the fabric and I got a much more dramatic marbling on this one. I think this one will be fun to do, like maybe the silhouette of a crow or a witch for Halloween in a solid color, and just let that dramatic fabric speak for itself. So that one, and this one is more of kind of a walnutty color. Oh, my oven's preheated. And this one I'm going to be stitching, this is by Primrose Needleworks. It's Autumn in New York. So I just love that fabric for that design. And I did a pink color. And I wasn't really sure what I was going to do on the pink. I just wanted to do a pink. And I am going to stitch, this is Country Cottage Needleworks, Merry Christmas, My Dear. And I think that's just going to be lovely on the pink. I can't wait to get that one started. That'll be one of my mania starts. This is a bit bigger piece. This is with the navy. I'm going to show you both sides because both sides are a little different. And this one is gray with some tan mixed in, so it's just a little on the warmer side. And then my next two pieces, let's see, let's skip this one. My next two pieces are green. I got a lot of comments on these greens that everybody really loved these. And I'm going to show you two different examples. And you'll see that the modeling is much more subtle on one of the pieces and much more obvious on the other piece. And this is where the size of the dish that you dye in really matters. And so I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but I wanted to show the difference. This one I scrunched into a much smaller dish, and this one I used a larger dish. So you can see the difference there. All right, so we will get started here. So the first thing when you're preparing your fabric, and this is kind of the two that I normally dye. This is the Charles Craft, the Monaco 28 count. It's 100% cotton. Now you can dye different varieties of fabrics. You just want to make sure you get the correct dye for the type of fiber that you're dyeing. RIT makes their dye for natural fabrics as well as a synthetic dye. So we're going to use the regular dye today because this is 100% cotton. This is a 15 by 18 inch piece, and this is a 20 by 24, so you can get them in different sizes. Today we're going to be dyeing the 15 by 18 inch piece. If I am dyeing the 20 by 24, I usually use a 9 by 13 inch pan. So just so you know, size comparison, the bigger the piece, the bigger the pan. So I'm going to set these aside because we're not going to do these today. So I've got a 7 by 11 pan, and that's what we're going to use to dye our pieces today. And the first thing you want to do, and this is optional, this is truly up to you, but I edge stitched these on my sewing machine with like a zigzag straight stitch. It kind of does a straight stitch with a zigzag combined, and I find that really holds the edge well so it doesn't ravel as we go. But once again, totally optional. So I've got 4 pieces here, and the first thing I'm going to do is just get them nice and wet in the sink and rinse them out. And I've got a sink full of cool water here. So you just want to get them good and rinsed out. Sorry for the water sloshing noise. And then I'm going to wring them out really good. So I'm just going to ball them up in a ball and squeeze the water out. Maybe I'm going to wrinkle them another way and really squeeze the water out again. And this is just going to help with that modeling to get lots of good wrinkles in there. You just want to make a mess out of it. And then we're going to start getting it in our dish. So this is our 7 by 11 dish, and I'm going to start just kind of, you want to do this motion, just kind of scrunch it in. Okay, just kind of scrunch it in. You want your scrunching to be as even as you can get it. I really work on those corners too and the edges to make sure they're not climbing up the side of the dish. They're kind of all even. Okay, so here I'm kind of partway done scrunching. I'm going to keep scrunching a little bit more and show you what it looks like when I'm happy. I really found this is so quick and easy. In fact, my daughter on Wednesday night, she's 14 years old, she'll come and sit with me when I'm stitching, and she's never really been interested in doing this, and suddenly on Wednesday she had interest. And I wanted to capture that moment quickly. So I asked her what color she wanted her fabric, and she wanted kind of a medium gray. And I wanted to start her out stitching on Aida. So I had some white Aida in the drawer, and I whacked off a piece that would be about the right size for what she wanted to stitch. And within an hour, we had it hand-dyed, dried, in the frame, and she was stitching. And just to show you, here is her piece. So today's Saturday, she started this Wednesday evening. She's made a ton of progress. And we hand-dyed this Aida, like I said, and she was off and stitching within the hour. So it's really can be a really fast process. So super excited to see her finish this one up. And we'll share it when it's finished as well. All right, so I'm just going to keep scrunching away here, scrunching. I try to avoid any big kind of lines or folds, kind of break those up a little bit. And I'm going to show you 2 different methods that I've been using to actually add the dye to the fabric. One is a little more fussy, and one is like super easy. All right, so I'm pretty happy with that. Just really smush down, kind of separate all the folds out and try to get them as small as you can. All right, and I'm going to grab another piece of fabric out here. I'm going to really squeeze the water out, get some on the countertop. Roll it up, squeeze it again. You just want to squeeze out as much excess water as you can because you don't want that water to really dilute your dye when you add it, but you do want your fabric wet. It's not going to scrunch up well, it's not going to hold its shape in the pan. And really starting out with it good and wrinkly helps the scrunching process. So I'm just going to do this again. Just really scrunch it in there. Try to get it as even as I can. And a small little scrunchiness that it will let me. So now the bigger the pan that you use, so if I was to put this in a bigger pan, my scrunchies wouldn't be as small, right? Because it's in a bigger area. So that's going to affect how your modeling looks. So really experiment with your pan size and how much modeling you want. Maybe you like that dramatic effect, or that's really appropriate for one of the designs you're going to do, or maybe you want it much more subtle and you really want to scrunch it up good in a smaller pan. Sometimes it just depends on the mood that you're in that day. So scrunching away here, kind of dividing it up. Now I'd probably spend a little more time on this than I'm going to spend here, just because I know you guys are waiting for the next step here. So I just want them to look about the same here. And then smush it down in. You want to kind of get it as flat as you can down in the pan. Make sure your corners are tucked down good. All right, so 2 really scrunched up pieces of Monaco ready to go. So I'm going to do these both with the same batch of dye, and I'm going to use 2 different methods to add the dye to the fabric, and then in the end we'll see the difference between the 2 and why you might choose one over the other. So I'm going to use a glass Pyrex just measuring cup. This is a 2 cup, which is plenty big. So I'm just going to add some water. And since I'm going to do 2 pieces, I'm probably going to add it right up to 2 cups. All right. Other supplies that you're going to need other than your glass baking dishes and a glass to mix your dye is, I got some old plastic mixing spoons or measuring spoons, a pair of rubber gloves, an old paper plate, this one's from Christmas, and some white paper towels on top. You're going to need an old towel to dry your fabric with after it comes out of the oven, some tongs to remove your hot fabric into your rinsing water when you're done, and some pot holders. All right, I've got a whole variety of RIT dyes here. You can just pick some very basic ones to get started. I love to experiment. This really brings out the artist in me, so of course I had to have a big palette to pick from. I've got my oven preheated. It says 255 on there because my oven heats up 20 degrees high, but you want to set your oven for 275. And we're actually going to bake the fabric for 30 minutes after we get the dye in place. All right, so we've got our water, about 2 cups of water in a Pyrex measuring cup. And then I'm going to pick out some dye. So I'm going to go kind of for a nice neutral tan, maybe a little bit on the walnut side. So I'm going to pick out Pearl Gray. This is just basic tan, and then dark brown in case I need to darken it up a little bit. You want to shake these up good. This is my exercise for the day. And then I'm just going to start adding them. So I think tan is going to be my primary color, so I'm going to start there. This is about a teaspoon. And I don't do exact science with this. So I'm going to throw a whole teaspoon in to start, maybe about a half-ish more. And then I'm just going to mix it up. This is going to be your palette as far as getting your color right. So I'm going to mix this up good. I'm going to get a couple drops and drop it on my paper towel. And then you're going to see about what that color looks like. Set this down. Okay, so that's pretty light and it kind of washes out. Now remember, when your fabric dries, it'll be just a little bit lighter. So what the color looks like wet, you know, think a shade lighter when it dries. So this definitely is not dark enough yet, but it's a good starting point. I'm going to add just a little bit of gray because I just like to warm it up here, or cool it off, or whatever the gray will do. So I'm going to mix in a little gray, and then I'm going to do the same thing. Just grab a couple drops on the paper towel. Didn't change it a whole lot, but you can see the difference there a little bit maybe. So I might throw some more gray in. And this is just mix and drop a couple drops till you get where you want to be. There. And I think I see enough of a difference. It's subtle, but it's just toned down that tan a little bit. So now I want to darken it up by adding the brown. Right? And I can tell you the brown is really thick, almost kind of sludgy. So I'm just going to start with a little bit because this will make a dramatic difference. So maybe 1/3 of a teaspoon, and then I'm going to stir that in really good because it's pretty thick. And then just a couple drops on my paper towel. And there's drop number 4. So you can see that really darkening up. I might add just a little bit more. I think I want to get a touch darker than that. So a little bit more. Stir that in. Alright, I'm going to add a couple drops. And you know what? That's about what I'm looking for. So let me show you the result here. So that bottom one is the one where I'm going to say, yep, that's about where I want to be, knowing it'll dry just a touch lighter than that one. I'm done. You can see where I started, and then you just add your different colors until you get the final result. If it gets too dark, pour a little out, add a little water to dilute it out a little more. If it's not dark enough, add more dye. Pretty simple process. All right, so there's 2 different ways that we're going to add the dye to the fabric. The first method is the fussier method. We're going to spoon it over, and the idea is to spoon it over the high points of the fabric and then let it run down into the low points. And you're just going to kind of spoon it over and let the fabric absorb. You'll get a little puddling underneath the fabric, and that's okay. We'll pour off the excess before we put it in the oven. You're going to get a little bit more dramatic contrast in your modeling this way, because the fabric that sits higher in the pan is not going to absorb a lot of that dye as it runs through, but the fabric that sits down low will absorb more dye. So you will see a little bit more dramatic. There might even be patches where it still looks almost white. So you're going to get lots more variation. So if that's what you prefer in your finished product, then this might be the way to do it. And like I said, it's more fussy, but it's not hard. I'm just spooning over, making sure I touch all of the white spots with a little bit of dye so nothing's left truly white. We're almost there. So I'm just going to kind of double check and make sure I kind of got everything. Go along these edges where it's sticking up a little bit. Make sure I got my edges. For those of you that stitch really close to the edge, you want to make sure those get covered well. All right, and you'll notice, here I'm going to bring it up where you can see it a little bit better. You'll notice I do have a little puddling in there, and that's okay. What I'm going to do now is put on one of my rubber gloves, because I'm going to hold the fabric in place while I drain off the excess dye. So I'm going to support the fabric. I'm not really pushing in at all, I'm just keeping it from sliding out. Drain off the excess dye, kind of tip it so anything running in there kind of evenly coats. And that one's ready for the oven, so I'm going to set it aside. So that is the spoon method. Now I'm going to show you the pour and pat method, which is actually my favorite. The color variation will be more subtle, but it's super easy, and I actually like the effect myself better. But really your personal preference. My oldest son says you do you, and that's totally what this is about. So I pour the dye over the fabric. That's why this is so easy. And then I'm going to use my gloved hand, and I'm going to pat. So pour and pat. And I'm just going to work that dye through the fabric without splashing. Just pat it in. Good. It's kind of like a bowl of cereal. You don't want the milk over the top of the cereal, but you want to see it in between the cereal. Now you got enough in there. I'm going to be very careful when I pick it up. I hope you guys can see that. There's just enough in there for the fabric to be good and wet. but it's not submerged. And just pat, pat, pat. If you're worried, you can kind of work your wrinkles a little bit, your scrunchies. I kind of stick my fingers in there and just give it a little gentle movement. I might roll the dye around in there, make sure everything really got covered. And this just gives the fabric more opportunity to pick up dye, those higher ones, by patting it in there. And that's why it's a little less subtle. And then I'm going to pour off the extra again, supporting the fabric with my hand. There we go. So I'm going to show you these before they go in the oven. You can see this one's already a little darker, the one I did the pour and pat, and this one looks a little lighter, and that's because of the different method. So I'm going to pop these in the oven for about 30 minutes. That's just going to help heat set that dye. And help that beautiful fabric come to life. All right, 30 minutes. There we go. Couldn't remember how to use my timer there for a minute. So I'm going to pause the video and we'll come back when we're taking the fabric out. We'll see you then. Okay, and we're back. And I have a confession to make. I made a mistake on the first round and they did not turn out. So I've got a second round in the oven that I'm going to pull out. They've been in there for 30 minutes. I'm going to show you the process of what I do when they come out of the oven. To get them finally prepared, and then I'm going to show you what went wrong so that you guys don't make the same mistake I just made. And it's a really simple fix. So, pan number 1, pan number 2, and I prepared these exactly the same as the first batch. So one is spooned over and one is the pour and pat method, and you can see the difference there. So after they come out of the oven, I've got a sink full of cool water ready to go. And we just want to rinse them. So if there's any areas that are still wet or there's still any puddling of dye, that we get that extra dye rinsed out. So there's no dripping, so I'm just going to go ahead and drop this one in the sink of cool water. And this one as well. And we'll just make sure that we rinse out any dye. So I normally do this, I get a little bit of dye, maybe that comes out, especially if they're still wet at all. But I can tell you after a really good rinse and they dry that first time, I steam press them with my iron. So I'm pushing that steam through the fabric with heat, and I have a white towel on my pressing pad and I don't get any bleed through of dye at all from all the pieces I've done. So this rinse right here, as long as you do a really good rinse, is all you really need. And I do have just a slight tint to my color. So there's definitely value in rinsing these out. And I'm just going to drain that water. You're going to hear it suck down in the end. Because I live in the country and we have no resistance in our drain. It's awesome. And I'm just going to give these a final rinse here with some cool water. Kind of wring them out. And then I've got just an old towel I'm going to spread these out on, and here's where you can smooth them back out into shape. And these turned out perfectly, so the adjustment that I made was the ticket. And I'm going to show you the difference here and explain what I did wrong. And I did it because I was in a hurry. Let me rinse this final piece here. And get the extra water out of that one. All right. And I'll smooth this out. So I hope you guys can already see the difference between these two pieces. They're still wet, so they have to dry yet. I'm gonna just roll the towel over and roll it up here quick. And we're gonna just press out any extra water. Just towel dry the fabric. We don't want to wring it at all. It's just press. Let the towel do the work. All right, and we'll unroll these. So here is our final product, except for they need to dry. They are going to lighten up a shade as they dry. And then we'll press them with steam, and that'll get them nice and flat again so you don't have all the wrinkles. But this was my pour and pat method, and you can see that I've got a lot more coverage and the modeling is less subtle than this one, which was the spoon method. So you can see the modeling is much more distinct. I have a lot more lights and darks and variation, which, you know, depending on your project might be exactly what you're looking for. So here is the variation, same exact dye, just a different method of applying the dye to the fabric. All right, and now I'm going to show you what went wrong so that you don't make this mistake too, because these pieces are probably going to end up in the trash. So in the RIT dye directions, it tells you to use the hottest water that you can use for the type of fabric. And when I mixed my dye earlier, I didn't want to run the hot water for a long time, so I just put some tap water in there and went off on my merry way. And what I learned is temperature is very, very important for your dye mixture. I'm going to show you this one up a little closer, and you can see that I don't have any blotchiness, I don't have any red spots at all. It's turned out really good. Okay, so me wanting to go faster and not really follow the directions, here's what happens when you don't use hot water. See all of those? It almost looks like rust marks on my fabric. My heart sank when I pulled this out of the oven and saw it, and I quickly redid the other one so I could show you what it's really supposed to look like. This was a huge flop. So I did not mix new dye. What I did was I took the dye that I had left, and I had a lot left because remember we poured all the extra back in, and I popped it in the microwave for about 1.5 minutes until it was steaming. I didn't even boil it, just, you know, it had a good amount of steam coming off the top and it was nice and hot. I stirred it up again and used it, and I absolutely have no red marks at all. So temperature matters. You want nice hot water. And if your tap water isn't that hot, just pop it in the microwave and get it till it's just a little bit steaming, and that temperature worked just great. So lesson learned. Now you won't have to make that mistake and throw your fabric away. I'm super excited that you guys were able to join me today and learn a little bit about my process for dyeing fabric. If you have any tips or tricks or exciting things that you've done with your fabric that you want to share, please comment below and share those. That's what this community is about, learning from each other. And this video is my way of giving back to everybody that I've been watching and enjoying and learning from. So I'm super excited. You know, these we'll go ahead and dry them. I usually get very impatient and I start ironing them when they're still a little damp yet, but they will press out really nice and look like the examples that I shared earlier. Actually, let me see. I didn't show this one earlier. This was one that I did with teal. So that steam press, you know, you'll get a nice flat finish again. They'll be ready for stitching on. All right, so go load up on some RIT dye and some Monaco if you can get your hands on it. I got most of my Monaco at Joann online. I got a few pieces at my local Michael's store, and I learned yesterday from somebody else's post on the Stitching with the Housewives Facebook page that DMC offers it on their website, and sure enough I went and checked it out, and they actually offer more colors than you can get at Joann's or Michael's. So there's another option, it's the DMC website. So if you dye on different fabric, please share what your outcome is. Once again, this is 100% cotton, but you can dye linen, you can dye just about anything. So please share, please comment if you have something to help us learn, and we'll see you next time around. Thanks everybody.